Hello and good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Coffee Table Talks. Today
Howdy,
we
howdy.
have howdy.
Good
Today
morning.
we have Hardik Mehta from Uber with us today, joining us. And in the chat, I already see some of you guys already chitty chatting. That's awesome. Good morning, Tracy. Will, thanks for testing out our YouTube. You're the best. If you want to add comments or ask questions, feel free to do so via the Twitch stream, the YouTube stream, or the LinkedIn live stream, and you will appear right there scrolling. So don't embarrass your family. Okay? Okay. Because it will live and forever on the internet. People can screenshot. I've done it before. Okay.
Once or twice.
Yeah. Like, oh no, that was a bad decision you made right there. Don't do it. Anyhow, with me as always is Will McCullen, the program manager at the IT Center for Excellence at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona.
Well done.
I know, I did so great. Thank you for my gold star. You know how much I need them. If you're new here, my name is Rachel Arnold. I am the human API with Secure Nation. You'll probably see my CEO scrolling through the chat. His name is John Davis. Reach out, connect. He's fabulous and fantastic. He's a good guy. Hardik, have you always been super interested in the risk of things?
Yes.
I know in the pre-show we were talking about you're more of an infrastructure guy. So I'm curious, how does one go from physically building things to discerning risk? That's what I want to know.
Starts off with, oh my God.
Probably usually.
Thanks a lot to Secure Nation. Thanks, Rachel, for having me on the show. Thanks, Will, for all the background and all what you do for the community out there. This is a very good question. I started my life being fascinated with computers and digital tech, especially how does one write an email from a small town in India and then reaches NYU within minutes. Back in 90s, it was maybe hours, and
Yeah.
then you get a call next morning from the university that, hey, I got your email. I really like your application. Why don't you hop over to New York and
Wow.
we'll discuss about your admission. So that was like early 2000, right after 911. And I was always, as I said, fascinated about servers, data centers. I saw them in big magazines back in India. I grew up in a very small town outside Mumbai, Bombay back then, to parents where my dad was a real estate broker trying to make his name for himself in that part of the world. My mom was a teacher. She retired as a teacher and a principal. So
Yay.
very, very simple beginnings. And for me, it was always building something. I still like to build something with my hands. I'm always doing something. 9 out of 10 times I'll be with my boy making Legos. Now he's 5, but now we are graduating to like the 8-year-old and 9-year-old Legos.
Oh, I'm still on 7-year-old Legos. We just put one together. We just put one together the other day. So my husband and I are interested in a bunch of different nerdy stuff. He's also in cybersecurity. I didn't mention that. He works for a large global company. He's like the lead SOC analyst, principal SOC
Nice.
analyst, that guy. He's that guy. And
That's a stressful role.
it, buddy, it's stressful to be the support of the stressful role. Okay. It's a lot of like, you got a call? Oh no.
Yeah.
But
That's why the coffee industry is booming, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a good thing I like it. So he gets calls quite often. Yes. But also the thing that happens is our friends confuse what our fandoms and different kid toy things that we like are.
Yeah.
I'm the Lego lady. He's like the not Lego man.
Got it.
So one of our very close personal friends got him like a Lego kit of a Bulbasaur. So he got the Pokemon part right.
Got it.
And my husband was like, I'm not putting that together. I'm going to chunk all the pieces across the room. It's going to be terrible. So me and the 7-year-old put it together.
Nice.
And it worked out. Anyway, I'm sorry. I had to interrupt with all of that. So
That's fun.
like
So from there, as I said, I always like to build those Legos, and going back to the introduction, um, I was an infrastructure guy until I did my MBA from NYU in financial risk and then overall risk management back in 2012, 2013. And that got me in the rooms with all these risk managers from big banks, being in the center of New York, and B, with senior executives who are spending time also learning the skill of how do you quantify the investment of your infrastructure to your leadership. Because at that point of time, in right after the market collapse in 08, 09, everyone was in that rebuilding mode, that if I'm going to ask for XYZ, I need to quantify it, I need to make it more simple, and then I need to justify it long term. And that's when I picked up the numbers. I was always fascinated by numbers, but that's when I'm like, there's this dark side of numbers which no one wants to talk about. It's a thankless job. It's big spreadsheets with 1,500 tabs on it before you started automating it. But that's the bottom line. Like, the board of directors will always ask me, why do I care? How much will it take? We'll still be done with it once we are done with it, or there's a tail to it. And then that got me into consulting, which was very much focused on developing those risk systems for Fortune 10, a lot of banks especially, and then a lot of manufacturing giants. um, and 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 from there, I just said this will be my niche. I want to stay away from infrastructure where I'm not building stuff, but I'm still in trenches where I'm advising where the investment should go based on the risk. And I still do that almost every day. That is it really important to put my money, resource, blood, and sweat into something, or we can keep this, accept the risk, and do something which is more important. So that um, risk versus reward, I think applies everywhere. It's sector agnostic, and that keeps me going. But also, it also comes with a lot of responsibility, because then it's my throat to choke if I say this is important and that is not important, and that blows up.
it is. How do you deal with the stress of that? Like what happened? Has that happened?
A lot of
Where
has happened.
yeah.
Luckily not at Uber, but at Microsoft definitely. Where we are working on one of the biggest certification, FedRAMP, on all the infrastructure across US. This was 2021, 2022 during COVID, and then the new regime comes in, and the new regime says, especially after SolarWinds hack, new regime says we have a Biden cybersecurity executive order to do something totally different. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to still focus on my infrastructure certification 70%, and I'm going to focus 30% on my executive EO. Um, and I figured that we will still meet all the requirements for both of them. But then after 6 months, I realized that the executive EO is much more than what it entailed, and it is much deeper. And then I had to slow my certification criteria down, and go to the board of directors, ask for more money, put my hand on my heart and say, hey, the quantification model told me something else, and we did something else. So um, I take full responsibility, and that takes a lot of courage as well, which
Yes, it does.
which I
You
which I've learned the hard way most of the times. Um,
yeah.
um, and we eventually met both of the requirements, but it was a lot of war rooms, a lot of that Q4 2023, 2022, sorry, Q4 2022 and Q1 2023, where me and my team were doing easy 100 hours a week, easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't take it doesn't take a huge wrench in the cogs to
Yep.
suddenly now we all have a problem to fix and we
Yep.
got to spend a lot of time on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
been there before.
so folks on the audience understand. I mean, I went and, just quick Google, doesn't take much to get to where you're doing a presentation at RootCon. You've got a heavy technical heart and background there. I mean, you're now heavily on the business side, massaging numbers, focusing on risk, but you're not just an ordinary person doing that. You've got the technical chops and background for that understanding, and for all the students in the program that are, have that technical background. If your interest is in risk, if your interest is in that direction, sorely needed, correct?
Yeah, 100% will. And glad you brought that up. So when I came to New York, 2006, 2007, um, I have a computer science engineering degree in bachelor. I have a computer science with a major in cybersecurity as my master's. Um, and I did my internship at Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and then went to ADP. My first role at ADP right in 2008, 2009, after the market collapse, was racking and stacking all servers into data centers. And then you need to understand all these protocols, um, from CCNA to CCNP, to TCP/IP, to SSH, all of those. You have to, and for students especially, a lot of people just, and I do a lot of mentoring as well. They're like, well, how do I get into it? And I'm like, get into CompTIA Security Plus certification, at least get started with that. Go to your community college and see if they have a 1 year or 2 year associate program. I know, Will, you're running one of those programs there, so shout out to you as well. A lot of community colleges are doing that. And I'm like, now with AI and YouTube, especially during COVID, there's so much free material that you can study, probably brush up with a crash course for 500 or $1,000, and then give you an exam, and then now you have a certification under your belt and you learn a lot. So you have to be a technologist at heart, even though you're not actually writing code, but you should be able to read code. You should be able, if you're big into networking, you should know your basics. And if you talk to any of these head cyber officers, risk officers, they are into dirty details. People don't realize that you have to be in trenches to A, to figure out the needle in the haystack, and B, to challenge your engineers, to challenge your analyst, um, and then bring in that perspective that those details are what matters at the end.
That's an awesome message. And it hasn't, I would say, it doesn't come across enough, right? That when it comes down to brass tacks, it's what you're actually stopping, what you're actually doing, and it it's it gets down to the details.
It does, always. And that differentiates you, right? Because people will quickly realize who is, what do you say, up for the challenge. In a crowd of 50 people, there are like only two type of individuals. One is, hey, I'll figure it out and I'll make it work no matter what. And then B is, I'll take my time, I'll do my research, and then I'll figure it out. And you need both of them in the room when you're solving a big problem. um,
Yep.
and I say that, and a lot of big industries have this value. Even at Uber, we have bias for action. So even if you don't know something, you raise your hand and you say, I'll figure it out. Give me a day, give me a couple of days. There's no harm in that. And when you're working, and then Rachel, now since you gave me a personal story, your husband will say that same thing. Like 9 out of 10 times the threat comes in, and it's a call. And I've been on those calls as well, where the call comes in generally on a Friday night, Saturday night, or on a long weekend, or during
Yeah.
Christmas or Thanksgiving, especially in my retail environment now. And it's an incident, and you stop everything.
Yep.
And the first thing they're like, let's do a triage. Let's see what it is. Let's take 2 hours and then give a root cause analysis, do a postmortem, and then let's figure out the remediation. And then those 2 hours in the academia is that I'll take a day or two. I'll do a postmortem, or I'll do what I learned, what I don't know. I'll do a second level detailed, deep down study, and then I'll be good at it. And a lot of people don't realize that self study, and that spending time understanding the problem, breaking it down into smaller structures, and then which is the lowest hanging fruit, which will give you the most impact, is how you solve all these big hairy problems.
Yep. It really is.
That's a gem right there. So you have a very unique perspective, right? So you understand infrastructure really well. You've been involved with some major companies that are major targets in all of this. From your perspective, in what we're facing nationally, especially as things heat up internationally, how goofed are we?
Oh, are we talking about all the CISA layoffs? No,
well,
not yet. Okay.
that comes into play too,
Yeah,
right?
it's a loaded question, Will. It's a good question, and for us at Uber, and a lot of my friends in the tech world, I saw a comment also about impending tariffs. Well, that 3 or 4 layers to it. One is the nation state actors playing big into hitting tier one infrastructure, and that tier one infrastructure is not only your big enterprises, the Microsoft, the Caterpillars, the Bank of America, the Coca-Cola, the Porsches, and the Fords of the house, but it is also your power lines, it is also your water lines, it's also your sewage, it's also your waste management, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's your railways and telecommunication networks. So how do the changes in the political environment reflect on the layers and the zero trust implementation which goes into your corporate environment? That is one of the biggest threads which every time a new regime comes in, people start, what do you say, unpacking. The second one is, how do you then beef up your VSOCs? How do you change your policies live? How do you implement better data handling and data governance structures, but at the same time stand up inside a threat environment? So at Uber and a lot of my other tech giants, we are like completely beefing up our inside a threat network. We have something which I'm very proud of, and my team is very proud of, is what we call as a human risk element, where for us itself, there's a method to the madness on how do you get your Uber score. So if you're an Uber customer, you have a score out of 5, right? A 4.8, 4.9, and that changes based on your certain behaviors.
I am a 5-star Uber customer, just so you know.
That's awesome.
I'm always well behaved and tip very well.
That's awesome.
And I've never thrown up in the back of one, because that's rude. They will dock you points for that. Don't do that.
You'll lose a lot of points if you do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. On the human risk side, so what we have put in is, and we took a leaf out of some of the big banks and big tech giants, is how does your internal employee behave? Is he doing the training on time, he or she or they? And are they doing their attestations on time? Are they swiping in, swiping out wherever they are supposed to and where they're not supposed to? What documents they are touching, what documents they are uploading, and based on that, there's a live dashboard, and you get a score of from 0 to 100, and it's like a credit score, and then and your managers can see that, and then your leadership can see that, and then it has a lot of security indexes to it, like what are your permissions on what files have you sent out to your personal emails, and based on that it moves, and that has been one of our really good indicator on sometimes, where what we see is that not always well behaved people are generally going to do the right thing, and that's also one of the big lessons we learned. And the other piece was, how do we enable them to do better? So now what we are doing is we are using some of the credit unions or transwise and Equifax methods, where we are saying, hey, you are on the index of 0 to 100, you're 60, but if you want to reach 80, you have to do XYZ systemically and consistently. So they know that what will move that in human risk index from 60 to 80. So that is the second thing. The third thing which we are doing well with this new regime, and then the last thing which we are doing is just being very open and transparent about our AI policies. So if you see, Dara, our CEO, and all our leaders, they are very enthusiastic about how the market is headed with AI. Uber was an AI giant even before this Gen AI term became
Right.
big. Uber started the easiest, what do you say, way to reach somewhere, the quickest way to get from point A to point B with different options. Way back when, even before Gen AI became a thing. Now we are just beefing Gen AI to do things much more quicker. But we are super honest about it. We are transparent about it, and we want to publish more guardrails, both for our product community and then for our consumer community, to say, if you want to partner with us, and which a lot of people do, like we have deep partners with big heavy car industries. We have partners with Waymo as well on autonomous, and then we are getting partnership with a lot of insurance companies and banks because of the money we move and then the insurance we require. And that's where we are being transparent, we are being highly accountable, and we are being um, technologically advanced but still cautious on our risk side, saying, hey, we'll allow all this, but there are guardrails on anonymization, there are guardrails on our data infrastructure, there are guardrails on racial biasing, there are guardrails on confirmation biases, there are guardrails on profiling, and we don't allow all this. If you are okay with those guardrails, then we can partner, otherwise we cannot partner. So I think that is really one of the key principles which our leadership is embarking on right now from I think at least a year.
That's a huge challenge. You know, especially in IT, I would imagine, because IT is filled with everything from the neurodiverse to folks that probably set off some of the models normally. And things along those lines. But from the thinking much more on a more larger perspective between partners and the threats that are coming up, because you have a strong influence and are able to protect and take care of your company, and you have a lot of resources to do so. But now it's coming up to small businesses. You've got all sorts of things open up across this country. Do you see any movement or anything going along? I think it came up in one of the questions asking about how maybe we can be sharing, working together, making differences along those lines.
And that's why I do a lot of community work. And if you see all these big leaders in security space, they share as much as they can. And for new listeners or who are getting into the industry, I would say that start researching about FS-ISAC, which is the community for financial security players. So all the banks and hedge funds, they have this community called FS-ISAC. We have similar community for healthcare, which is Healthcare ISAC. And we have a very similar community for aviation, which is Aviation ISAC, just started last year or a year back by a couple of leaders at Delta and Alaska Airlines, and United, pretty good upcoming community. And then you have, so that is like a deep executive level knowledge sharing. Every single chief risk officer is on those, every single security officer is on those. Now if you want to geek out, then you have the B sides of the house, the RSA of the house, the blue hats of the house, the ISACA of the house, the ISC square of the house, and the red hat and DEFCONs of the house. So those are like the deep technical control plane, funky things which you don't see outside. So I was in my first time black hat in Vegas a few years back. I would say 10, 12 years back. And it was in Caesars at that point of time. And for people who are joining internationally, Caesar is one of those giant casino. It's like a warehouse,
Yeah,
hotel,
they're massive.
and they have close to 80 entrances and exit, and then they have like at least 20 elevator bays, and the conference is there where all the security conferences are geeking out. And then this was a day before the conference, and one of the defender, I like to call my guys defender guys and gals. One of the defender had a really poor experience checking in, and they were not treated well, and then they're like, hey, I want to show these the hotel people what we can do, and just for fun, they took out entire elevator bay for 20 minutes. In
I'm
in
sure that got
matter of
somebody's
two.
attention.
So it just took them 2 minutes to get into Caesars network. And right now the Caesars and even MGM and a couple of other big casinos, CISOs are my really good mentors and friends. So I can say that 12, 15 years back, it took them 2 minutes to get into the network. They got the entire elevator out of operation. And eventually they're like, we'll bring it back up, but this is the power of the people who are on the good side. So where I was going is there's always the community will where you brought me to, that if you don't share what is happening, the adversaries are at least 10 steps ahead. and
Uh-huh.
and, and for us to think that, hey, we are isolated and we are protected, even as an enterprise or an infrastructure community or even a bank, is wrong notion. Is the more you share your threat, the more you share how we are trying to protect our infrastructure and what is on the horizon, the more you learn and the more you think how interconnected everything is.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. That how many DEF CONs you've been to, right? Where you walk in and the elevator's at a BIOS screen,
Yeah.
or the slot
Yep.
machines, or
Yeah, didn't all the airlines experience that funness just a little while ago with all the blue screens? Anyway, moving on. Hayward has a question. How do we integrate AI and automation into IT risk management? I think that's a great question. And also, I just love the name Hayward. It's
A really good
what a,
question.
what a beautiful romantic name, Hayward. Like that's
Hayward,
great.
Hayward, we are dealing with it, and almost everyone is dealing with it, and I see a lot of these vendors now throwing in AI word everywhere. So first and foremost thing is you have to identify how true that is. If you're going for a vendor which is projecting that they are like 80% AI integrated, and in your control stack for risk management, especially in IT risk management, I would say that the MIT released, I would say, a it's only like 200 pages, but it has 120 different AI IT risk models from all different parts of the world, interrelated. So
Really?
yeah,
Wait. Okay, now I'm interested. Hold on.
I posted that as well. Then Cloud Security Alliance, I was on the committee editing their control structure 6 months back, and then Cloud Security Alliance released their control library, um, which is a very good start for hybrid cloud and integrating hybrid cloud controls, whether it's Azure, AWS, or GCP, or even Oracle, into your infrastructure and directly into your risk control structure. So that maps directly with your PCI, SOC 1, SOC 2, your FedRAMP, Texas RAMP, and then CCPA as well. Then what on the risk management or the assessment side of it is, I started this at Microsoft when Copilot became big. I was adjacent to Copilot. We were in the same group working for the same CVP, and what we did was, initially we had a 200 question risk assessment. Most of people will agree with me, but when AI came in, we said this will not work for AI, because AI is basically two ways to get in. One is an API, whether it's a DeepSeek, whether it's a cloud, it's an Anthropic, or it's a different model. It's just a way to upload your data, change certain things, and do prompt engineering. And one is that if I cannot do it on a publicly traded website, and there are nation state actors behind it, then I'll probably put it on my own infrastructure and do it. So a lot of banks are doing that on their own infrastructure. So then the risk piece differs completely. If you're trying to risk assess a third party website like deepseek.com, which became insanely famous in the last 2 weeks,
Right.
and then we had incidents around it and fire around it. So did a lot of big corporations as well. And the easiest way to start is I'll go to my quantification business is 10 questions, 5 questions on inherent risk, 5 questions on residual risk. What is my impact? What assets does it touch? How frequent is going to happen? What is the data policy on it? Like, are my people going to upload their tax statements? Are my people going to upload their deals? And you'll be amazed at what people upload on these websites just to get a summary
Oh,
of
yeah.
it. Just to
Yeah.
get a return on investment that, hey, I am going to pay 5,000 in taxes, or I'm getting a refund of 10,000. That asking DeepSeek that question. So um, so what is your data transfer policy, and then what is at your endpoint, that can you upload that kind of data? So that will give you the inherent risk, and then they'll also spit out a residual risk based on your loss event frequency, that how frequent these things will happen, what is the magnitude of it at the end, and then do you have any compensating control that eventually this data cannot be uploaded, and then we don't have to worry about it. Even if people try, it's not going to happen, and then the residual risk is low. So and then that comes from an NIST AI RMF framework. So it's NIST, which is one of the biggest publications for security, and they have an AI RMF risk management framework, which does two. They have a very detailed questionnaire for the risk assessment, and then they have this light NIST AI RMF, which is 20-25 questions, and we have even made it lighter to 10 questions, integrated directly into our risk posture, along with a lot of governance, training, awareness, and nudges, which goes into a corporate environment. That, hey, my data scientists will like to geek out, and they would like to test every single model. How do I give access to them without losing my data integrity and confidentiality? But my executives will like to see which is the best for overall, what do you say, product strategy, and then which one they should invest in going forward. A lot of the tech giants want to play along with partnership. So they're like, do I partner with Claude? Do I partner with Anthropic? Do I partner with NVIDIA? Uber just came up with a big partnership with NVIDIA. Where will the money go? And they put in a lot of investment, saying, hey, play with this model for 2 months and then tell me which one I should invest, or $500
Yeah.
million, right? So that comes with a different responsibility. And then the last one is the fun one, where every employee says, I really like this, I want to play with it, and can you make this available to me? So those are 3 or 4 sections. So you have to know your audience, modify your risk assessment, make it automated as possible as you can, but make it quantifiable. And the quantification will come in from your industry. So if you are highly regulated from in financials,
Yeah.
you'll have SEC knocking your door, SEC, Security Exchange Commission, for people who don't know. You have FTC knocking your door, Foreign Trade Commissions, and they will give you the ranges, that if your materiality is from this to this, your exposure is this. So you should bake in those materiality with your impact and your likelihood, and then that will give you a spit out that, hey, this is my magnitude. If this happens, the loss to the bank or a hedge fund is close to a billion, fines of 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. The exposure is too much, it's directly critical. Rather than telling them the old version, and a lot of people still use it, is amber, red, yellow, green, and yellow,
Yeah.
red. And it generally works only to a point where it fails completely, where I cannot explain my leadership what's the difference between an amber and a red, or a red and a green, if I cannot put it in numbers. Because my leaders don't care if it's red or green. They just care, am I secure? If I'm not secure, what should I do to get secure? What are my use cases I put my most, what do you say, heavily investments in? And then how is my next year going to look? So those are some of the things which you should think about.
Okay. Now, for everybody out there, right? If you think your job is bad, just try to go for a day in his shoes, right?
A lot of people ask me, right? And then I've been in this role for 18 months. A lot of people ask me, from an infrastructure role, you took a role in Uber, which is very fast paced. How is it? And my answer is, it is challenging, but it is rewarding, because I'm
Right.
I'm, I'm now in a space which I always love, which is infrastructure. People did not realize that Uber is a tier one critical infrastructure until CrowdStrike event happened. Rachel, you just brought that up when airlines were grounded, right?
Yep.
All across the world. And I was supposed to go to Nashville with people like 15 of my best friends celebrating our 40th. Out of 15, 12 of them were celebrating our 40th. So there were people meeting us in Nashville from all over the world. I had friends coming in from Toronto, I had friends coming in from Sydney, Australia, and no one was able to reach Nashville that day. In fact, no one was able to reach Nashville even a week after. Um,
Right.
and I was also working that day. We became pronouncedly a tier one infrastructure when Greyhound got grounded that day as well in United States and Canada,
Yeah.
because they were all on CrowdStrike or Windows infrastructure. And the biggest what do you say learning and the biggest community act which we did, two things which we did that day was, one of the big thing is, do not put all your eggs in one basket. So always have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D for your infrastructure. uh,
Yeah.
and then B was, if you are actually in a critical infrastructure community, you cannot take advantage of someone's misery. And what do I mean by that is that airlines were grounded. Uber's priced for an hour when things started going down became 200% surge. And then when we realized as leaders, we got a call and we are like, hey, we cannot keep on doing this. The drivers are going to make a lot of money. We are going to make a lot of money, but we don't want to do that because people need to reach A and B. So
Right.
what we did is we started triaging, like who needed to go to hospitals, who needed to go to what do you say emergency services, like who were the firefighters, who were XYZ. We started routing that first at the base price. Second, we in some areas dropped the price even to half and pooled money in. And then the third one, we started routes which were never before. So New York to Boston as an Uber route, New York to DC as an Uber route, New York to North Carolina as an Uber route. And imagine being on a car with a driver who you don't know for close to 8 hours, 10 hours. When you're already stressed that you were supposed to be at a certain place to meet your loved one who is not well, is so crazy, right? So there was this empathetic element to it during that time as well. And then
Good.
that's when we realized that we are in a business of moving people what matters and when it matters, and then you have to do that, and not look at a lot of what you say profit loss scenarios at that point of time. The other piece which was really important for us at that point of time was, how do we partner with airlines in future, and how do we share that information. So um, we started an internal consortium where airlines, and we have this with Amazon as well, and Amazon, they have some planes, and FedEx, they move a lot of things. The commercial airlines, of course, move people, and the freight one will move freight. We are in the freight business, but just on the roads. But I'm like, if you don't share all this intel and the information of what's going on, then there's no point in running a big critical infrastructure business.
Right.
And Will, you pointed out a very good thing, which I now realize is that Uber, if you go into the NASDAQ and NYSE codes, so there's a code on how they categorize.
Yeah.
Uber is actually in transportation,
Right.
but Uber on the back end, for all Silicon Valley geeks, and eventually all the tech people, is one of the biggest tech giants in the world, because we changed the paradigm of how people travel, and then we scaled it in 10 years. So a lot of people think of us as the biggest tech company in the world, but at the heart of it is we are one of the biggest travel and retail and entertainment companies of the world. At the
Yep.
same time, we are the freight companies of the world. So we play in so many sectors, that we are like generally sector agnostic.
Yep.
And that's fantastic to hear, that you're taking the whole purview of the importance of life, the importance of infrastructure, the importance of community into play, not just profit, not just business, but being a part of the community. And that is so difficult, especially at times for many IT elements, is to remember how important it is that the machine fits the people instead of the people having to fit the machine.
Yeah. And that took me from Microsoft to Uber. So a lot of my Microsoft execs, the day I said I want to go, um, shout out to them. They took me out for a golf evening. They took me out for dinners. Some of them invited me to their homes and said, "Why do you want to go? You're doing amazing here. You're on a path to get promoted to a GM in like few years. Why do you want to go?" And I'm like, I want to. It was two things. One, the personal mission, as you said, was to work for a product which impacts your daily life. So Microsoft impacts your daily life, but people don't see it upfront. It's a B2B product, right? Most of it is a business to business, community driven product. But a product like Uber is it's a verb, and then when it becomes a verb, you have an extra layer of responsibility of keeping people safe. So I'm at an intersection of trust and safety.
Yeah.
I am also on
Mhm.
all those incidents where I get a call when someone is threatened, so their life is in danger on an Uber ride, and people realize that it still happens in a lot of countries in the world. So it's some personal mission to make sure that my passengers and even my drivers are safe. Now secondly, it's a technical challenge as well on how do you scale a product like Uber and how do you make it better and better and more efficient.
Yeah.
And then the third one is, for me, as Will you said, I've always worked in my 15, 18 years of before Uber in Fortune 10, Fortune 20 mega companies, 200,000 employees, 300,000 employees. And I'm like, I'm always been tasked to be in my lane and to do that one thing. But at Uber, when I joined, it was only 22,000 employees. We are at 25, 27,000. So it is the smallest company I worked for, and it's still a startup mentality. You do so many things, and you're challenged every day because the um, scale is humongous. But without automation, you cannot do anything. And I want to go back to a point which you made or Rachel made, that we have a lot of resources. We do in terms of money and then finances, but our security team is 200 people strong. That's it. Where we protect close to 16 billion rides a year,
Yeah.
and 22,000 employees, 200 to 50 people running security on Uber product, Uber Corp, and Uber customers. I think is fascinating.
It is. It is very fat. For me, that's one of the things I enjoy most about learning about a new organization I might be partnering with to help assist them with their vendor relationships, right? Because when I work with Secure Nation, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Is I help facilitate these third party relationships, and that means partnering with the third party risk management team. That means partnering with individuals such as yourself to discern what those risks might be to your corporate environment, to have those folks in there. That means answering to sudden risks that need to be answered by the third party groups, such as who loved having Log4j as a
Yep.
Christmas present early in 2022,
Yep.
2023, 2022.
2022. Yep.
Yeah, that was fun. And suddenly everybody's scrambling to try to get a hold of their partners. If you didn't have that information sorted out, I
It
was
was
your
hard.
girl.
It was.
So anyway, um, it's it is interesting to see how big the security teams are within some of these larger organizations. And then also, I think it was really neat that you share the perspective on the company sizes that you've worked for. I have never in my life worked for or alongside a company that was bigger than 35,000 employees. That's the biggest that I have worked for or with. And it's mind boggling to
Yeah.
think how in your lane you must stick
You
and
have.
why that is. But
You
then I thoroughly enjoyed working internally with a company that was about 20,000 employees. I loved putting on different hats suddenly and jumping from thing to thing. That I think that just speaks to how I've taken my neurodiversity and turned it into a superpower.
nice.
So if anybody um, suffers from neurodiversity and you're in that one lane, I need to talk to you about your coping mechanisms because I don't understand how you function on a day-to-day basis in your one little lane.
Go neurodiverse people. In fact, my talk at RSA, which probably I might not able to do, and I'll do it next year, is on neurodiversity. So 2020.
Oh, I'm doing one at the Human Behavior Conference this year in November in Orlando on neurodiversity at cybersecurity.
2022, I was diagnosed with something which is 1 in 300,000 people.
Yeah.
And it impairs my ability to hear and function after a period of time. And
Does it? Is it called auditory dysphoria?
Yeah. And
me too.
and people will be amazed that there are so many people like us. In fact, there are people who are kicking ass in the realm of IT and cyber. And Microsoft and Uber, both of them have been amazing with me during this journey of self-reflection, discovery, and coping healthily, and then accepting that as a challenge and saying, hey, I can do XYZ better when I'm under stress, and how do I do it, and then how do I share that openly. So please, if you're neurodiverse, or don't feel that you'll not be heard. You will definitely be heard. There are a lot of people out there, and I am totally positive that if you have anything which is impacting your ability to do XYZ, there are alternative technical advances. Microsoft is huge in that, and Google is huge in that as well, where you can be hearing impaired, what do you say, vision impaired, and something else as well, and the technology will solve things for you.
Do you know how excited I am to talk to somebody else that understands how? Did you mask it before I masked? I pretended like it wasn't happening, and then would get deeply embarrassed.
I was lucky that I was working for Microsoft, and Satya Nadella has kids who are neurodiverse, and in fact, one of his boy passed away with a condition, and at a tender age of 17 or 18. So we had a company-wide email. We had an hour of silence, and then that's why I was lucky where my leaders openly talked about it during COVID. We openly spoke about it as well. We checked in on each other, and for managers out there, I definitely vote that up. And someone, John Martin, said that emotional intelligence, so one of the big skill set in roles like mine, and even every chief risk officers and security officers, and even Rachel, what your husband does, you need a very high EQ to succeed than the high IQ.
Right. Yep. Definitely.
People deal with high amount of stress. People deal with high amount of personal problems. People deal with a lot of business problems flowing into their personal lives, along with a lot of, what do you say, family commitments. And then a lot of times when you're completely hands on deck for hours and days without having an end of the tunnel, where a lot of times I've been asked, hey, when will your call end? And I'm like, I don't know.
You know what happens? I've noticed so much that a lot of the relationships that I get very excited about building directly come out of whatever is happening in my personal life. So whenever I reached out to connect with you, I was utilizing Uber so much. Like that whole week. And I was like, I wonder who works for Uber, because I am that nosy person that goes down a rabbit hole that if I am taking, if I am a customer of a service more frequently than usual, or if my kids are interested in something new, I will immediately go and look at who's on the security team and the risk for all that stuff, especially when it comes to something as important as, I mean, I'm going to be selfish here for a second. When this mommy of 3 is driving somewhere and I want to make sure I get there safely with the least amount of risk possible, that's whenever I look up guys like Hardik and I'm like,
we have a problem,
right? You want to, I don't want the doctor doing the operation that got a C to graduate. I want the doctor that got an A.
100%.
Like that's just me though. And Hardik got an A. So I felt good about it. Very good about it.
Nick brought up the Ability Summit. So Microsoft Ability Summit generally happens in March. It's coming up in a month or so. People should look that up. I think Yogita had a good question around some funding allocation. You brought that up.
Yeah, I had it up there. Here we go.
Yogita is a good friend of mine. So Yogita,
Yeah.
thanks for joining in from Toronto.
Nice. Hello. How willing are businesses to allocate funds for security budgets, and what challenges do you face in securing approval for these investments, if any?
So the funds allocation also happens through a quantification ticketing system. And that's where cyber risk quantification has the highest impact or the ROI. So for large corporations, if you cannot quantify the impact in either hours saved, human behavior changed, risk reduction in numbers, you cannot get anything approved. So the first and foremost things either the banks or the big tech of the houses, and even a lot of big hospitals as well as we do, um, is um, give me all the big use cases. Where do I want to do automation? What is my impact? How many people I can utilize to do something much more meaningful, where human eyes and hands are needed rather than doing just the mundane work.
Yeah.
And a lot of security work is mundane work. A lot of it is data crunching. A lot of it is looking at logs. A lot of it is
Yeah.
opening tickets, closing tickets, looking at severities, patching servers.
Yeah.
Um, and the fundamentals have still all, and they'll always remain the same. They've not changed. So look at those, do a quantification models on those. Some of the models which we use are fair cam, Monte Carlo. You can easily start with a simple fair model with only three things: impact, likelihood, and severity. And then it will give you a score, and based on the score you can at least quantify, and then that will become a 0 and a 1 conversation with your management rather than a freaking essay which you'll have to write. So that becomes easy. um,
Yeah.
but what becomes hard is, or the challenge which she's asking is, as I said, every vendor is pitching, hey, we are the best in AI, we are the best in this, we are the best in that. How do you vet it out? You have to test drive that vendor. You have to make sure that the vendor values align with your values, number one. Number two, are they willing to go that extra mile? And then the third one is, are they actually shaping the next gen of security? So if they're not, then I'm like, if they are coming in and they are going to learn from me, I want it to be a two-way street, whether it's a software vendor, whether it's a human resource vendor, or whether it's a AI vendor. But if I'm not doing justice to them, and then they are not able to do justice to me, I'll not buy them.
Right. Right. Good answer. We had another question too that came in from Tim Schnur. How is data classified at Uber? Is everything classified tag that drives AI viability?
Oh yeah, data is one of the biggest puzzles. And we have a huge data team. So we have a data engineering team, we have a data security team, we have a data AI team, a AI governance team. Close to, out of our infrastructure people,
Yeah.
close to 30-40% of them just protect data. Then from legal, close almost 80% of people protect data, and they have the guardrails on it. The classification is very much similar to financial payment giants, L1, L2, and then L3. L1, L2 gets tagged automatically using tools, systems based on certain criterias. Internally, even driver data gets tagged clearly. And then L3 is where we have certain leniency and changes in certain countries. So based on country specific regulation, we operate in 110 countries, so it becomes very hard. And
Yeah.
that's the automation comes in, that hey, Italy has different laws to classify data compared to state of California, compared to state of Texas, compared to Australia, New Zealand, or India, right? So
Right.
then that's when then you put heavy duty automation on that classification criteria, and then you run governance committee. So we have three committees which we do. One is an ERD committee, engineering review documentation committee, which will look
Okay.
at all privacy issues within that product before the engineering review happens, which goes directly to the board. And those issues are treated as P0. So you have 24 hours to fix those data leakage issues. Then we have a BRD committee, which is a business requirement approval committee, when the product says, engineering says, yes, we are okay to do this product development for you, or make a feature where you can ask for your own data sets, right? So there's a feature where you go into Uber and you say, give me all my ride settings in last 1 month, give me all my ride history for a quarter, give me all the ride history for a year, give me a ride history for last 5 years.
Right.
And then if that's a feature which has to go through changes, so we have to mask certain things, unmask certain things, then business has to approve it, business has to see the risk behind it, and then those issues then are again classified as P0s. I run that issue management program, which again we automated the whole thing of it. And then the ones which we cannot remediate, but the still product has to go out live, we have to do a risk acceptance or an exception, where the business will say, I accept the risk, give me 6 months to fix it, but then put some compensating controls on it and still release the feature. And
Right.
that's when the money comes into picture, that hey, if I don't release it and I block your feature for 6 months, how much Uber is going to lose? What is the ROI behind that, and what is the impact of that? So very good question. That whole data strategy drives the eventual feature release strategy at Uber for us.
Very cool. Yes, very good question. Thank you, Tim. And we've got just barely enough time if you can do a short answer for
Mhm.
we have one more,
Yeah,
Hayward, that I thought was great.
no, I'm liking it. It's really
From
good
Hayward.
action.
How do we ensure that IT risk management remains proactive rather than reactive? I like that question. That's a nice one to end it on, I think.
That is one of my missions as well, that build predictive risk intelligence services. That's on my tagline on LinkedIn as well, where you have to be one. I like to be 5 steps ahead of the adversaries, but at least one step ahead of the 8 ball. And you build it using integration. So integrate with your IT people. Your IT people are your best friends. Help desk people, get all the logs from your help desk. Your user access reviews should be coordinated. Integrate with your regulatory people, whoever is your auditors, whoever are doing all your regulatory mechanism checks and balances, both on the IT side and on the financial side. Integrate all those systems. And then the last one is training and awareness, that um, 9 out of 10 what do you say, exploits happen if because someone is not trained to do their job right, or they don't know if they are doing something malicious, they just do it, and they're like, oh, I was not aware that that was a phishing email, I should not have clicked on it. So how do you integrate on your processes a heavy duty training and awareness mechanism to first prevent the blast radius? And the most you can prevent the blast radius, you can definitely secure. If you don't, if you should know your blast radius, so get all your systems catalog, make best friends with your IT and biz techs and product teams. B, get a really good governance mechanism on it. I would definitely say automate it. And then the last one is heavy training and awareness component.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Because we're getting down to the end here.
It is. You got like 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Well,
No
if we need to
pressure.
go a little bit, the one thing I'd like to point out to everybody in this session, and thank you so much, Hardik.
It's
You
fun.
have to understand, everybody, that what this session was today is a master class,
Yep.
right?
I knew it was
Because
going to be. I just knew it.
yeah, but listen up, folks. For those that are the tech heads in the group,
Yep.
right? Take this. I recommend you rewatch this to understand how you've just been given a whole different perspective of the big picture of how valuable and what you do falls into a business perspective, being able to make that into a business model, how to be able to communicate that up to the executives, what they need, why they need, and how in the midst of all of this, elements that you have to worry about with risk. He just laid out a whole bunch of different concepts in different areas that if you research and get to know,
Yep.
you are so much more ahead of the game.
And I'm open on LinkedIn as well. So a lot of students write me that, hey, I'm struggling
Hang
with
on.
this. Give me either input, give me a 30-minute. My calendar generally is packed. The 30-minute will happen, but probably after 3 or 4 weeks. But I'm insanely a big believer, and that's how I've learned, reaching out to the leaders. And that's one of the big legacies I learned from the leaders, is how many leaders you create. and that's what I'm all about. That if you are stuck, then you want more info, write me. I'll definitely get back to you.
And that brings me to that final point of all this put together. It's the humanity behind it that's important.
Yeah.
It's all that. And here you have an open invitation to talk with somebody who understands, has been through all the potholes, has been through, miles down that road. Thank you so much.
No,
Awesome.
my pleasure.
Awesome.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Will. For students, I just want to lay out 4 things which has helped me. One is embrace reds. So if you get a red, even if on your course, embrace it, and then that works in your professional life also. One of my leaders has given me this, that if you don't see the reds, embrace it, you'll never improve. Second one is ask for help. Asking for help is not a bad thing. Third one is fail fast. Fail, it's fine. It's your time to fail. And the last one is grab the most challenging opportunity in the room. So if someone says, hey, I'm struggling here, what do I do? Raise your hand and say, hey, I want to help you out. We'll figure it out together.
Oh,
I like
that's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
As an educator, I tip my hat. Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. It was an amazing discussion.
Good. Stick with us after the show, Hardik. We've got a few more things just for the 3 of us.
Yep.
For everyone else that tuned in today, thank you for bringing your fabulous questions. You're the best audience that anybody on the planet could ever ask for. Just amazing. Next week, we'll be hosting Patrick Garrity with Volncheck. He's a pretty top-notch cybersecurity researcher.
Yeah, I like his research.
Yeah, he's got some great stuff. I'm looking forward to introducing everybody to him. I've chit-chatted with him over the years off and on, bumped into each other at different conferences, stuff like that. And finally, I get the distinct privilege of hosting him next week. I live a charmed life. I get to hang out with people like Hardik, like Patrick Garrity, like Will. Man, I'm just going into my whole weekend feeling real grateful. I don't know. It's a positive way to think about life, I think. But
it is.
Thank you so much. And thank you, all you new folks, as well as the traditional regulars and coffeeholics that stop by every week. No fail. We love you so much. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.
This is the part where we wave and smile.